Why is it that when a Jewish father told his child what she was going to be in life, Deuteronomy 6 and 7, Proverbs 22:16, that it was accepted by secular society? But if a Christian father does the same thing, he is being oppressive. The individual went on and said this, is it because Judaism is considered to be a more ancient than Christianity by secular people? Now, when I get a question, I don't know all the time what's in the mind of the person who asks the question. And so sometimes I have to either say, I don't know what he's talking about, or I just have to guess. And guess what? Guessing ain't always good. I am not fully aware of what's going on in the mind of this individual. 2 times he makes mention of the word secular, doesn't he? Secular society, secular people. So in other words, somehow this individual believes that secular society, a society that's set apart from Christianity, set apart from religion, looks at Judaism one way and looks at Christianity another way when it comes to the raising of children. And that very well may be the case, but I would need to know a little bit more information about where this individual is as far as his perspective on this question. But we can still talk a little bit about the training of children under Judaism and the training of children in our society today. It's a little bit different, isn't it? In Jewish culture, young men, and you can underline that, young men could be educated in 3 different ways. First, it was a requirement that every Jewish parent educate their children well in the law of Moses. A while ago, the individual quoted Deuteronomy 6 and 7. And that's exactly what Paul is talking about in that text. Notice what he says. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. Now listen to him. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. When thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest in the way, when thou liest down, when thou risest up. It was a requirement by the Almighty God that Jewish parents sit those children down and they teach them on a regular basis, a continual basis, at all times. That's indoctrination. That's exactly right. It's teaching children. And it was to be done constantly. And folks, listen to me. Most Jewish parents did a good job training their children. So that was the first part of the education. Secondly, young men were also required to learn a trade that they could use in order to make an income. Jesus was a carpenter, wasn't he? In fact, Mark 6:3 specifically says, is not this the carpenter, not the carpenter's son? Is this not the carpenter? His father, who was a carpenter, trained him to be a carpenter. We turn to Acts the 18th chapter, and all of a sudden we get some insight into the Apostle Paul, and we learn that he was a tent maker, was he not? You see, his father had trained him to be able to work and labor with his hands to make tents if he needed an income. What about Peter, James, and John? Those boys had been trained to be fishermen, had they not? And they were all from the same area. They were working in their father's business when Jesus came and called them to be fishers of men in Matthew the 4th chapter, 18 through 21. So it was a requirement. Yes, you've got to train them in the law, and you've got to train them to have a trade. Folks, you've got to be able to make a living, don't you? But there was a third way to educate a Jewish male, and that was to send him to one of the rabbinical schools. These were the doctors of the law. These were the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the priests. Now that kind of an education was not free. That kind of an education was going to cost the parents something. And Paul had been trained in that manner, had he not? Notice what he says. I am verily a man which am a Jew. Born where? In Tarsus. In Cilicia. Yet brought up in this city, that's Jerusalem, at the feet of Gamaliel, and was taught according to the perfect law of the fathers. I don't know how long Paul spent there. Usually they would go somewhere around 4th grade as far as our time is concerned. And they would be there for several years training under the feet of specific scholars of the Jewish religion. Here's what's interesting. Paul was not just a tent maker. Paul's predominant occupation when he became a man was a rabbi in Judaism. So in other words, even though his father taught him to be a tent maker, that wasn't how he made his money initially. Now that tent making was going to serve a big purpose in Christianity, was it not? Because he'd have to give up his Jewish religion. And there were times as he went around as a missionary, he was not supported as far as a missionary was concerned, so he had to labor with his hands. And I bet you he was tickled to death that he knew how to make a few tents, don't you? Now anybody who was not sent to the rabbinical school, he was looked upon as an ignorant and unlearned man. Remember in Acts chapters 4 and 5, Peter and John are arrested. They're brought in before the council because of the miracle that was performed at the gate beautiful. Here again are the doctors of the law. Here are the scholars of the law, the teachers of the law. And they look upon these men and they say, these are ignorant and unlearned men. All they knew how to do was what? Fish. They hadn't been trained under the feet of men like Gamaliel. So 3 ways a Jewish male could be trained. Number 1, he had to be trained in the home. Number 2, he had to have a trade taught to him by his father. And number 3, it may have been if his family was fortunate enough to be sent to a rabbinical school. Now what about in our society today? Things are a little bit different, are they not? However, as far as Christian parents are concerned, it is a requirement that those children be trained in the Lord, isn't it? And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6, verse 4. Sadly, the Jews did a much better job training their children than we have done in the church today. You know that? If you don't believe that, just look at a church that's aging, isn't it? Look around at congregations and who's here? It's the older individuals. The question is, where are the young people? Why aren't they here? Where are those children? Many of them have forsaken the truth, haven't they? Now we also have different educational routes that children can follow in order to become employed, do we not? In fact, there's 4 major ones. A child can go to a university. I remember when I was growing up, that was expected. My dad didn't go to college. My mother only went to 2 years of college. And I knew from, I guess, the day I was born, that boy's going to college right there. No ifs, ands, or buts. You're going. So I did. And many kids still do, don't they? But there's some who just go to a trade school. They learn to weld, they become plumbers, they become carpenters, and they go to school in order to learn those particular trades. And they never, ever darken the doors of a university. And guess what? Some of those individuals make a very good living, don't they? Here's what's interesting too. Some develop a career not because of college, not because of a trade school, but because of an extracurricular activity they were put in by their parents. When I started first grade, they had a piano class that started at 7:30 in the morning. I think it's 3 days a week. And so my mom said, Vic, you're going to piano. We didn't even have a piano. I thought, how am I going to play a piano if I don't have a piano? Well, you know how you do that? On a paper piano. And I had a paper piano for about 4 or 5 months. But you know what could have happened? If I'd have done what I should have done, gotten interested in piano, got good at piano, I could have become a piano teacher. I might have even become what? A master pianist. I know you're laughing at that. Let me tell you something. When I quit at the end of 7th grade, I was pretty good. 7 years of piano, you get pretty good. Okay? Don't know a thing now. But there's kids who participate in sports, and guess what? They become phenomenal sports players, do they not? Individuals in band, individuals in dance, individuals in gymnastics. And those individuals, even though they may get a college degree, they may know a trade, guess what? It's their extracurricular activity that they excel in and brings them their job. And then there's some just go into the workplace immediately after high school, don't they? They go to a place like Publix. They may hire on with a plumber or a carpenter, and they never go to trade school, but guess what? Their job trains them in the various skills that are needed, and they slowly move up the ladder, and after 5, 10, 15 years, those individuals have pretty good jobs and are able to support themselves. There's some kids who never go to college, and yet they become great entrepreneurs, don't they? And they start business after business after business, never have gone to college, and yet they are just as rich as they could possibly be. My oldest daughter, she has a degree in biology, and she does hair. There you go. You know, spend all that money, send her to 4 years of college, get a degree, thinks she's going to go into medicine, and she cuts hair for a living. And guess what? She does good in her hair business. So we have a lot of different ways we approach things as far as education, kids going to school. The only big difference is this: kids had to learn a trade under the Jewish economy. We don't push that in our society today.